I just love the rolling hills of Kentucky. I just love the look of Kentucky. I love fog. I just love the atmosphere of this whole place. And also the people in Kentucky. It's hard to go places, I think, in Kentucky and find where people are just real jerks. I mean, they're out there, but I just like the people. They're just good people, you know?
Welcome to Friends in the Corner podcast, stories and topics from around Kentucky. I'm your host, Dan Pauly, coming to you from beautiful Lexington. Thank you for checking out the show today, and we've got an awesome interview lined up for you today that we're going to be getting into in just a minute. But I want to say thank you so much for listening to the show today, whether it's your first time or you've been around for a long time. I appreciate you tuning in, and if you like what you hear today, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your listening platform of choice. Also, while you're at it, if you're not following us on social media, what are you doing? Go ahead and check us out. We're at FITC Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But excited to be back with you guys as we get into the mid part of May. The Derby's behind us, the NFL Draft's behind us, and we get to look forward to a beautiful summer as hopefully the pandemic starts to come to an end and restrictions are starting to lighten, and we start getting ready to enjoy the state and all of its beauty in this summertime. And someone that's done a great job of capturing the beauty of Kentucky is my guest on today's show, Jeff Rogers. Jeff is a Kentucky photographer with over 30 plus years of experience, born and raised in the Bluegrass State. Jeff comes on today to tell us a little bit about his background in photography, and he talks to us about his love and his passion for the Bluegrass State. So I'm excited to get to talk to Jeff about all things Kentucky on this episode here, and just a really enjoyable episode. Now, I will kind of give you, my listeners, a little forewarning in advance that there were a little bit of technical difficulties recording this episode over Zoom. But even despite that, you can just hear the love and the passion that Jeff has for this state and Jeff has for his occupation. And we're excited to talk to Jeff at this time. So I say without further ado, we'll stop our yammering and invite the guest on. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Rogers. So the tagline for my podcast is stories and topics from around Kentucky. And I think today's guest is probably the first guy I've had on that's literally been all around Kentucky. We're going to be talking with Jeff Rogers here today. Jeff, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I have a lot of friends. Heck, I always like making a few more. So I like the name of your podcast as well. So doing good and excited to talk to you about Kentucky or photography or whatever.
Awesome. Well, I like to tell my listeners a little bit of how I got connected with the guest on today's show. And actually, Jeff came at a recommendation from a mutual friend of ours. A lot of people who have followed me know that I'm a part of a podcast networking group here in the Lexington area, the Lexington Podcasters. And at the most recent event, a gentleman named John Pearson, who attends the event with me, gave me a few recommendations for some people that I should interview, and he mentioned that he knew the best photographer in the state of Kentucky. Now, I may be embellishing some of John's words a little bit, but I got to really check out some of Jeff's work, and I have to say, I think that's pretty accurate, Jeff. Your photography is just so beautiful, and your content is just awesome, and so I'm just pumped to have you on here to talk about your work today.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, I'm Kentucky born and raised, and I love Kentucky. My wife and I get to travel a good bit because we don't have kids, and but I always love coming back home to Kentucky. So it's always good to be back home.
Well, good. Well, hey, Jeff, we want to make sure that our listeners get to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about your background and what got you here. So let's just start off with the easy question: who you are and where you're from.
Well, I'm from the big city of Corinth, Kentucky, population 250. Which is in Grant County. Most people have seen the interstate sign up and down I-75. So that's where I grew up. And that's what gave me I know that's what gave me a love for rural Kentucky, because I grew up in rural Kentucky, and I absolutely love Kentucky, and I love rural Kentucky as well. And so grew up there, went to high school, Grant County High in Dry Ridge, just a little bit north of where the Ark is. Of course, that was just a big field when I was growing up. Went to high school there, and then followed a girlfriend to Transylvania University, and ended up staying there. She only stayed for a year, but I stayed there for all 4 of mine. And it wasn't, I enjoyed it because it was a smaller community. There was only at that time, there was only 800 people at the whole college, and it wasn't that much different than the high school that I went to. So loved my time there, and I just like Lexington. So I've spent my never left, essentially, is what it amounts to. So that's kind of brings me up to speed, I guess, as far as being a resident here in Lexington is concerned. So
it's funny you say Dry Ridge, because I was going to tell you, I actually have some family friends that own a lake house up there at Lake Williamstown in the Dry Ridge area.
So yeah, absolutely.
And I've been up there quite a bit, and I gotta say that Dry Ridge is definitely completely different from Lexington. So did you have any bit of a culture shock coming from Dry Ridge to the smack dab middle of downtown Lexington at all?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, there's a big cultural difference between Corinth, where I'm from, and from Dry Ridge. Dry Ridge is a big city compared to where I mean, literally, my town, it's awesome. I grew up country church, and just wonderful people. And my family had I come from 2 generations of funeral directors, so we knew everybody because he was in the funeral business. But I don't know, it was a pretty big shift. But anyway, in my hometown, we didn't even, and still do not have a traffic light. There are stop signs, of course, but not even a traffic light. So, but no, it really wasn't that big of a deal coming to Transy where I was. For one night I went out, there used to be a thing called Ollie's Trolley. Have you ever heard of those? It was a cheap, greasy hamburger place. Well, fortunately, they're not around anymore, but they literally had a trolley car, and they cooked. It was a franchise. They cooked out of it. And so on the parking lot across from Transy is where I parked my 66 Chevy 2 Super Sport car with Krager wheels and all that. And come to find out, the manager of that place ended up jacking up my car one night, put it on concrete, and stole my tires and wheels. And so there wasn't any crime where I came from. And so to come out and see my beloved Chevy 2, up on blocks, man, it's like, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? So that was a big culture shock for me.
Yeah, like welcome to Lexington.
Yeah.
So college is what brought you from the big city to the bigger city, as you would probably say, right?
Yeah.
I guess college is when you said you really got started into photography, right?
Yeah, it's kind of another funny story. I was working on an art degree at Transy, and I was working as a painter sculptor. And my junior year in college, I got a job at Clark Equipment. They used forklifts in Georgetown at a big plant there right behind the way station, I guess. I met a guy there that went to Georgetown College, and he was a photographer. And I don't know that I had ever taken a picture before. And so we struck up a friendship, and I'm like, man, I think I want to do the photography thing. So I traded a very large handgun as an even trade for my first camera. So that's how I was interested in photography, or how I came to get interested in photography. And so I was able to take the training that I had been receiving in my art classes and just, plug those into, or using a camera, it's, using composition and shadow and light and all of those things. So I'm just pretty much self-taught. And at the time, there wasn't such thing as the internet. And my particular love was for black and white photography, not shooting people at all, but I just finished doing a shoot for a magazine right before we got to do this. So I love shooting people, photographing people now. At that time, I had an interest only in black and white landscapes. And I saw Ansel Adams' work. And my mom, for Christmas one year, bought me a book I told her I wanted by him, The Making of 40 Photographs or 20 Photographs. Anyway, I bought that book, and that essentially taught me how to use filters and how to shoot black and white photography. And then we had a dark room at Transy, and they allowed me to use that. So I just jumped in there and just learned to do it all by myself. And so it's a big contrast to today. We're on information overload, and there's so much. A lot of people are interested in photography now, which is awesome. But there's so much information out there, just a click of a mouse. It's really wonderful. So it's never been a better time to get into photography, and to because you don't pay for film and processing, and you can't buy a bad camera nowadays, a bad digital camera. The quality is getting better and better, and cameras are getting cheaper and cheaper. Anyway, kind of how I came into doing photography. And then I met a fella who mentored me, and I started shooting weddings because I'm the kind of have to justify things. And so John Mick, he still has a studio on Walton Avenue here in Lexington, and John's really an awesome photographer. So he trained me how to do weddings. I started doing weddings and stuff. And so anyway, I'll take a breath, see if you want to ask anything about all that. But that's how I got started in photography way back when.
No, I mean that's awesome. A couple of things that stuck out to me there. First off, trading a gun for a camera. That's the most Kentucky story I've ever heard. that
Hey man, it was an awesome gun. I wish it was a Ruger Super Blackhawk 44 Magnum. It was a Hoss. It was a nice gun. But anyway, I have no regret whatsoever for the kind of a crappy camera I ended up trading it for. But it got me started down this path, and I'm really grateful for that.
So as I was preparing for tonight's show, Jeff, I was going back online on YouTube and seeing some of your past interviews, and there's one I caught from a show you did a few years ago, and you had this old camera that you said was like one of your first cameras here, and it looked like almost like an accordion. It was like a box with this little like accordion-like-esque thing. And you said it was like one of the first things that you ever shot on. And now we come to now the digital era, as you call it. And photography, as you were highlighting, just changed so much. So I wanted to ask you, what have you noticed have been some of the changes in the realms of photography? And what have you personally had to do to adapt to all these changes that have happened?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. It has changed significantly. As you know, technology is excelling and speeding on at a rapid rate. But the camera I'm referring to, that was called a 4x5 view camera. And it's as old as that design is 18. Well, heck, there's pictures of the Civil War done with a camera like I did, and that's that Ansel Adams used as well. And so that was initially was my interest in doing that for photographing the landscape. But I used to use it a lot also to photograph product photography as a commercial advertising photographer. Now I've done that professionally. Had my own business for 33 years. I did a lot of product photography. And if you look on Amazon or go to Walmart, wherever you're looking around, there's usually a photograph that illustrates the product that you're interested in buying. And so they had to pay photographers like me, commercial photographers, to take pictures of those types of things. And so I actually cut my teeth on doing work for Valvoline. They were my very first, when I started my business, my first shoot was shooting the Indy 500 for Valvoline.
Wow.
And so that was wild. Actually, at the race itself was really cool. And then that led to being able to doing product photography. And so those days, you use the biggest piece of film you have, then when they scan it to reproduce it, the better quality it is. So imagine, have you ever seen a 35 millimeter slide, just a positive? I don't know if you've seen a slide before.
No, I don't think I have.
Like the old slide carrier. Okay, anyway.
Like a trombone slide, like.
Yeah. They're just, like Neil Simon's song about Kodachrome. It's a slide. It's just a very small piece of film. Well, a by 5 is literally 4 inches by 5 inches. So it's a huge piece of film. And so the reproduction quality of that is just really, really. And so from that, then I shot a lot of stuff for, it used to be a company called Hunter Manufacturing, and then mugs and cups and anything you could put a logo on, like they're wearing, any, or UK, anything you can put a logo on, they sold that literally all over the world and had the branding or NFL, NBA kind of sport you can imagine. And so I shot tons and tons of that stuff. Again, just the bills. It didn't feed my soul, but I enjoyed the people that I worked with, and able to make a good living doing it. So anyway, let me fast forward a little bit. So then digital cameras came around, and I'm like, man, there's no way quality can ever be good enough, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to a studio up in Cincinnati where an equipment manufacturer had a presentation for professional photographers. And I saw with my own eyes that you could reproduce something from a digital capture that was good enough for a 1.5 by 11 sheet, essentially. So I went ahead and bought my first digital camera. I fit on what's called a Hasselblad, or an Hasselblad. It's a large camera. It's the camera they took to the moon. It's probably one of the most famous cameras in the world. And there was a digital camera back that would fit on the back of the box on the back of this camera. And I paid $28,500 for that camera back that fit on that camera.
Man.
The iPhone that I've got now is probably much better quality than what I bought back then, $28,500. But in those days, I was spending like $15,000 to $30,000 per year on film and processing. And so that all of that went away. You would shoot film and then you would take it down and get it processed downtown, and then you wait a few hours and it'd be ready, and it'd be a transparency or a positive. Anyway, digital photography did away with all that stuff. But initially, and I was one of the pioneers in this region for doing digital type work, but then you learned to distill objects because it took 3 pictures. It took one through a red filter, one through a green filter, and one through a blue filter, and then composited those together. And so as the technology advanced, then I was able to buy a camera like you would, a Canon or a Kodak at that point, like you would expect a professional camera to look like, and you can actually shoot people. So then I started moving away from doing a lot of product work, doing people for annual reports or ads or billboards, whatever the case may be. And so I started doing digital back in 1995, full-time as shooting digital. And then of course, things have progressed. The quality and the clarity is just amazing what you get. And I'm still blown away. I mean, I love my, I have got the latest and greatest updated system, but my iPhone is the thing I've always got in my pocket, and it continues to amaze the clarity and the quality of this phone is able to do. But again, that's great for a display, but not as for an actual printed piece. So all that to say, things have really changed a lot, and whenever you think you've got it all figured out and it changes, something else really has. But also I'd seen for years where video was one thing and still photo another, and I saw them starting to merge and to come together. And so I started shooting video probably about 14, maybe 15 years ago with mini DV tapes and then onto cards and all that. And pretty soon there won't be much of a distinction between a still shooter, video shooter, I don't think. Or maybe that they'll actually be able to grab a frame from digital video and be good enough to reproduce in print or whatever that you're thinking about. And so anyway, is that kind of what you were asking about?
Yeah, no, it's cool to kind of see your journey through it all. Because how long have you been in photography for altogether, would you say?
Yeah, 33 years as a professional. My business on April Fool's Day in 1988. So seen a lot of changes since that time. So
yeah, and since then, in 33 years, I know you've said that you've had your work published in magazines and different pieces. You've had it published in places like UK Hospital, which I know you've mentioned on past interviews I've seen you're very proud of, and you even had books published with your photography. So kind of want to know, I guess, a little bit about that, like your publishing. Like, where are some of your favorite places you've had things published in? What certain magazines have you had the honor of having your stuff featured in?
Okay. Well, I'm glad you did bring up UK Hospital, because I love having my work in healing environments like that. But along with the assignment work for magazines or catalogs or whatever, I always what's called stock photography, where you shoot and then you license them for production for book covers or magazines or whatever. And so I guess initially Visit Lex used to be called Lex. Well, anyway, it didn't matter what it used to be called. Now it's called Visit Lex. they've always been one of my favorite clients. I love tourism related photography, and so they've used a lot of my work over the years. And behind the station, the news anchors, I guess, on all three of the networks, I've had like the big skyline pictures, that you see.
Oh, that's
What
you?
skyline we have. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Well, I don't
awesome.
know at the moment, but yeah, I've done a lot of those too. Well, and then out at the airport, a lot of big murals out there. And I've done a lot of that stuff. So anyway, shooting stock photography, and I really enjoyed that because I felt like that gave me some bit of freedom to do what I want to do, and yet it was still a thing. And so, and then it's like people are always saying to me, "Oh, you do a book. You ought to do a book." And like, it's really a big deal to do a book. I have all of this pre-press and pre-publication background because I've kind of followed digital world, from traditional photography to digital photography. And so I talked to one publisher that I knew that was a publisher, and they said, "Yeah, we've been wanting to do something different. This is really a great idea on Kentucky." And then they called me a few days later and said, "Yeah, we don't really know what to do or how we would do that or whatever." So talked to my wife about it, and I went to the bank for my business and said, "I want to do this book, and this is kind of what it like." So I gave them an idea of what it would look like, and they gave me more money to do the project than I was even aiming for. And so I ended up publishing I've 4 books strictly on Kentucky. And so my first 2 books were actually is a neat concept. It was called Kentucky Wide, WIDE. And so the image would go across pages. Imagine 2 8.5 by 11 sheets put together. So when you open the book, that's what you see. And so it's a panoramic that goes across both pages. And so the first one of those sold out in like months, and I was just thrilled and shocked at the same time. And then I did the second book, and it is being selling out quicker than I had expected. So those were different. So that was Kentucky Wide and Guide 2. And then I did another soft cover book that's expensive and was more of a visitor piece, I guess, something to take home that didn't weigh very much. And that ended up selling out, and it's in its printing and about done with the printing. And it's called Kentucky the Bluegrass. And then the latest Kentucky book that I've done is called Seasons of the Bluegrass, because whenever you talk to people that are here, really love the idea of having all 4 seasons. Now, you and I both know that people just curse time. When's this over with? I want to see spring again. But there's people that love the idea of us having a winter. And so the last book was Seasons of Kentucky. And so it was broke down to different seasons. And one thing about me being a country boy, and I said that in my very first book, is that I really love getting lost. I've got a knack for getting lost. I'm terrible. And I just love when I didn't have an assignment or didn't have a studio shoot, I would just head out somewhere, anywhere in Kentucky just to get out into pictures. And before I did that, it was James Archambault, and he passed away last year. He was an awesome photographer. And so he had, I think, 3 Kentucky books. He was the one that really paved the way to go out and just wander across the state and do, and he did really beautiful as well. So anyway, that's how I got into self-publishing. And then after that, I've done 2 more books, and they were more inspirational, devotional kind of books. I've always had a great love for encouraging Bible verses. And so I would take the travels that I would go on, and I've been to Iceland and Nepal and all kinds of crazy places like that. And so I would take images, awe-inspiring images from those travels, and then I would combine those with an encouraging scripture. And I've done 2 books like that are more inspirational type books. And so anyway, that's bringing you up to speed about where I am nowadays. So
that's awesome. And I've gotten to see some of your work on your website and just some of the beautiful pictures you've taken from around Kentucky, from the horses to Keeneland and Churchill, I believe, to the bourbon industry, which I spent a little bit of time in. So I'm very passionate about the industry and some of the beautiful photos you've taken there. And I know Jeff, you were mentioning how you're a Kentucky boy. You grew
Uh-huh.
up around here, but you've also traveled all over the world. But what is it that makes Kentucky such a great place to shoot? What is it that you love about Kentucky as far as your profession goes?
I just love the rolling hills of Kentucky. And I want to say this so I don't forget about it. You had mentioned bourbon, which you're a fan of, as well as much of the world. That's why people come here now. It's crazy how the tourism has just really taken off.
Hmm.
But years ago, a friend of mine does the interior design for Malone's restaurants. And so she says, she want to do a sin series. And I said, well, that sounds, what does that look like? And he said, they want to do bourbon and they wanted tobacco for decor. And I said, well, wild women. He said, no, no wild. So in all Malone's restaurants, when the bourbon barrel pictures that are in there, I post. And so, honestly, even though my father passed away from lung cancer from smoking, I love the look of tobacco. I love the smell of it when it's curing, and I love old barns. I love tobacco hanging in barns. And a lot of times, women that don't clue what to get their husband for a day or for a birthday or Christmas, they'll buy artwork that they've seen at Lowe's or seen on my website. So anyway, that's how I just wanted to mention the bourbon thing.
Yeah.
But I just love the look of Kentucky. I love fog. I just love the atmosphere of this whole place, and I like quiet, I guess. I'm an introvert, but I love getting up early in the morning and going towards or somewhere else before the sun has risen, just there on spot and just try to get pictures of the sunrises and before really the kind of before the world wakes up. I like going and in those kinds of images because most people don't see that. You can see just an awe-inspiring scene at 6 p.m., but you go back there at 10 o'clock, it's like, well, there's nothing here. I mean, this is pretty, but there's nothing special. It just takes on a whole nother world when you're able to do things, particularly early in the morning. And sunsets, of course, are nice too. Everybody likes those. So, and also the people in Kentucky. It's hard to go places, I think, in Kentucky and find where people are just real jerks. I mean, they're out there, but I just like the people. They're just good people.
My day job, I work in banking, so I meet a lot of the jerks. But outside of banking, it's very, I meet a lot of wonderful people from around the state.
I photographed a lot of bankers, healthcare and banks generally have the funds, have the money. And so I don't know what bank, but I've done a lot of banking stuff over the years as well. It was always good meeting and photographing them. So
So what have been some of your favorite places around Kentucky to photograph?
around Kentucky, I love Eastern Kentucky. You could just say anywhere in Eastern Kentucky, and I'm happy. Um, I'm very aware when I go down to Eastern Kentucky that I don't ever want to come across a uppity city boy that's down here to laugh at us or what. I love the customs. I love the dishes. I love the barns. I just love everything about Eastern Kentucky because it's a dramatic escape. You got a lot of fog down there. You've got a lot of hills, and um, gosh, these state parks, whoever, I don't know if it's Louis B. Nunn or whoever it was that started these state parks way back when, man, they're really positioned and nice as beautiful places. And so you can't go wrong going to any of them, especially in Eastern Kentucky, I think. And my wife and I have a place down at the Big South Fork, which is directly below Lake Cumberland. It's close to the Tennessee River, and it's a national recreation area. I have pictures of that in Geographic Traveler, and I'm like, what? That's here in Kentucky? I didn't have a clue. And so we ended up buying a cabin down there, and so I spent a lot of time down there. I loved it down there. A little coal mining community called Stearns, and that was really an awesome place. And nobody goes down there. And I hear that the gorge is run with people, but if you go further south instead of east, it's just amazing landscape down there. Another thing, I had no clue that now we have 12 covered bridges here in the state. And those are odd places to go for a day trip or something. Just want to try to, you can't visit all 12 in a day, but most of them are up around Maysville and in Fleming County, Rock County. And that's if you're in a car or a motorcycle, man, that would just be an awesome day trip to make, just to go and hit some of those. I grew up in Kentucky, but I didn't have a clue until a long time ago, that there was such a thing as bridges. And so I actually went after all of them way back when and had an exhibit, black and white exhibit of covered bridges of Kentucky. And I've got a poster print now that still's covered bridges of. So, you got that to look at. And of course, land between the lakes. And most of us here in Sydney think of that as another world over, but man, down to land between the lakes and up there at what's that called, Turtle Bay, I think there's an area up there with a lighthouse, and it's where Patty's 880 settlement is. Heard of that place?
I haven't heard of that one before.
Oh my gosh, the food is just out of this world. And the meringue on their pies are like, I think they say 8 inches high, and it really is. And so that's also this land between the lakes area near this turtle resort, which is like they even sailboats and stuff that are down there. And so that's a fabulous go, but that's a pretty good hike to get there. So it just has a lot of really, really cool places to visit, I think.
Yeah. And so I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio, which I don't know how much time you've ever spent in Dayton, but
I'm really sorry, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a reason I moved down here. And I tell people it's not Ohio's not a very scenic state. And then when I bring friends or family down here, they just take one look at Kentucky and they're in awe of it. They're of how beautiful it is driving around here. So it's cool just to hear about all the beauty that's in this state, because I'm that same way too. I feel like I've traveled a lot of the country and seen a lot of different things, but there's nothing quite as beautiful as the free range horse farms of Kentucky, the wilderness, and everything else that's around this state.
One time, well, not one time, I photographed the Derby a few times. Every time I do it, I say, I'm never going to that madness, but this would have been a pretty sweet one to be at because of the weather was just phenomenal and like a fraction of the people. But it may have been the first time that I photographed the Derby. I met a photographer from Japan, and he was actually in America doing a book on America. And he was in a really nice and then he and an assistant were driving around looking for pictures of America. So I don't know how I just got to talking to him, waiting for the races to start and stuff. And he had mentioned wanting to come to Lexington. I said, well, you should. It's a lot prettier here than it is in Louisville, where we are. And he says, do you mind showing me some? I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. So when the next day on the Sunday after the Derby, and his assistant came over here, I took him around just on the roads, not actually access, but on the roads around the farms. And they were totally blown away how accessible all of this beautiful scenery is and these beautiful horse farms are. That he just really could not believe it. I guess he thought they'd be in big gates and huge shrubs like in England or something, instead of fences, they have these monster shrubs, and I guess he thought it would be like that. And so when he got back home, he ended up, come to find out, he was a pretty well-known photographer, and he had published a book on China. And so he sent me this gorgeous book on photography book on China that he had done. So it was really cool meeting him and bringing him over here and seeing our world through his eyes, because he was just totally blown away that there was so much to see just by driving around the roads and around the horse farms. And of course, now with tours with the horse farms, it's easy to get into these places now. It used to be kind of secret access to go in and to visit. Now it's a big part of tourism. It's cool that people can do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond just Kentucky, I know you've traveled the world as well, and you've gotten to see a lot of different places. And I guess the saying is, every photograph has a story. So do you have any stories from your travels? Do you have any favorite locations that you like to go photograph?
Well, I'm of the age now where I start having bucket list places. So I'm 61. I feel like I still have a lot of life left in me, but I'm like, man, I need to start coming up, I need some places from a bucket list, after Morgan Freeman or whoever it was is in some movie was talking about a bucket list. And so I think the list for me was Iceland. And so it's relatively easy to get to, and it's not very expensive there. Food is expensive once you get there. But anyway, Iceland's an amazing, I've been there 2 different times. I was there once in September around my birthday, and then I was there once in January. So that's really an abstract landscape. And honestly, I thought it was prettier in the snow than it was because a lot of their mountains or their hills are volcanic. And so they're really not pretty at all. But when you have snow on them, they are really, really pretty. And so one time there, and I guess this is common. So if you go to Iceland, I never buy insurance on a car. Fortunately, I did my first time to Iceland because I was up on top of this mountain taking my picture and getting ready to, excuse me, I was going to get out to take a picture. And I opened up the door and the wind caught the door and it almost ripped the door off the car.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so broke the bracket. Fortunately, the door did not fly away, but I was able to shut it again. And they said that's a very common thing in Iceland because of gusts and stuff up on top of the mountains. So anyway, that was a memorable thing for sure. But I got some really awesome landscape photographs there as well. And then had to go to New Zealand and Australia. Never had a chance to go there before. And so New Zealand's a small, and usually we'll go, and I don't like doing, so we'll go and just rent a car. My wife and I rent a car and then take our way, or I'll find out where some of the most significant places are. We'll plot, and go plot our trip, go around different places. And so that was really awesome. Go to the South Island of New Zealand. That was really beautiful. And so I don't know, but then I've gone really bizarre, literally other side of the world, like Nepal. I've been to Nepal 2 different times now. And man, it's hold it, even though you and I had never spoken and I were with you and you were driving a car or I was driving an Uber and I was taking you somewhere, immediately kind of get a read on somebody because you get a sense of who they are, what they're about and stuff, whether it's or not, well, you go and you don't have a clue what it's going to, I think basically people are wherever you go, but their mannerisms and speech and everything just so entirely different. So fortunately, I had friends there. But one trip that I had in Nepal, I got to meet a fellow that was a former witch doctor in Nepal. And so that was really wild. And so I was there with a nonprofit, and I was there shooting documentary videos about people and about their life and kind of their journey of faith, if you will. And this one fella had been a former witch doctor before, and he was really a cool guy. Also, met and did a video of another girl who her family was like the worship leaders in a Hindu temple, and they actually did sacrifices there, which is, I don't mean to be smiling saying that, it's just so bizarre that and even though it's been illegal there for 3 years, it still goes on out of the country. So I had a chance to get some really an awesome testimony from this particular girl. It's been neat. But then this last year, right at 1 year ago, no, it wasn't a year ago. It was immediately right before COVID. I got to go. I never been to Africa before, so I got to go to Agadez, to Niger, to Niamey and Agadez, and that's where the Sahara Desert is. And so it's really, I just had the epiphany. It's like, man, I'm this country boy from Kentucky. Here I am in the stinking Sahara Desert. Can you believe it? And just a very harsh environment. And people are dressed, the things they wear every single day out there is just so much different. So I had a chance, I had one of the locals wrap my head, like in the Indiana Jones kind of thing in the desert, and so got to meet some really cool, amazing characters over there as well. But most part, I think people are pretty much the same wherever you go. But I'm just, especially since I'm such a country boy, I just have a real wanderlust and meeting people in different cultures and getting to know them a little bit. So just to see what their life is like, So
It sounds like you've had quite a lifetime of travel to a lot of cool places, and you talked about filling that bucket list. Is there any places that are still on the bucket list you're trying to hit?
yeah, there's a place called, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's Faroe Islands, Faroe. It's like you go over Scotland or Denmark and go north. Anyway, it's just a really abstract landscape that's over there. It's a very big island, cool. I've seen amazing images from Patagonia. I'd love to go there. I think that would be really neat. Wanted to go to Easter Island, but then I found out that it's such a long haul in order to get. I've had friends go there. Man, I don't know. That's really a long to go out there. Out in the middle of the ocean. Love to see the Fiji Islands or Tahiti or something. I think that would be really beautiful. That water, you see those pictures of water, and you're like, that doesn't even look real. But recently, some friends. I've had 2 friends now move to Hawaii. And so I've got an open invitation to go over there. And so I know a lot of people go there and enjoy that. So hope a trip to Hawaii sometime soon. So
yeah, and with hopefully, knock on wood, the pandemic kind of coming closer to an end here, there'll be more opportunities. Hopefully, as we start kind of winding down here, I would like to kind of ask you this question too, and you kind of touched on this a little bit at the start of our show, but for anyone that's wanting to get into photography, a younger photographer, what kind of advice would you get them so that they can get started and kind of start making their own name?
Okay. Well, there's 2 things. One is I know I've spent a lot of time talking about digital photography, but there's been a resurgence of film photography. And also, anybody that takes a class in photography have to do it old school. They have to do it by film, mostly black and white. And so I used to mentor a good bit, and actually was an adjunct at Asbury University in teaching photography there. And so I love making people either take their auto everything camera and making them use it manually so they know how it actually works. And so it's important to do that. There's a really big following. It's called Lomo, Lomo. Somebody looked up Lomo or Lomography. They've got a bunch of inexpensive little film cameras that are kind of funky that you can get some really cool effects from, and you can still find labs to process film, or you can do it on your own a little bit. So one thing for people that are interested in film, as far as photographers, man, it would be, I'm very fortunate. I've been very blessed all these years with a lot of clients and a lot of good work, and have been able to, make a good living doing that. But right now, everybody's a photographer, and it would be really hard to start a photography business now. I mean, there's always a niche somewhere. Like I know a lot of moms, and I don't mean no disrespect whatsoever, but they do kid photography. There's a market for that, and some starting and they don't charge very little, and some have been doing it for a while. They can charge pretty much whatever they want to. It's the same way with weddings too. To get to learn more about fee, John Malik had trained me to shooting, so that's another way that people can make money if they want to on the photography. And then, like I say, there's just such free education that's out there. I would just, let me rein this in a little bit. I would suggest find somebody's work that you really like. So maybe you want to do flowers. Well, study the paintings of Georgia O'Keeffe, and then find a photographer that does flower photography that you like, or buy an ebook on flower photography. If you really want to do landscapes, then, find out somebody that does that, or maybe go to a workshop. That's big business now, is photographers taking workshops. And I used to teach workshops at Shaker Village, and I always enjoyed that. And I haven't done one in a long time, but that would be fun. I enjoy helping other people learn. And so just find somebody's work you like, take a workshop. Now, you're not paying for film and processing, so just do it. I mean, actually get out and practice, And another thing would be to go to a museum or look at them online and study composition and light, why these people did what they did and why are they considered famous masters, So there's a lot of different news, but making a living, I'm not saying I'm just saying that technology and cameras cheaper and cheaper. Everybody is a photographer nowadays. And so it'd be particularly challenging to be able to make a living doing that. But I'm not saying it was possible. I'm just saying I don't know that I would make that same choice again. But I'm also glad that I got game, when I did. So
trust me, if it's hard to make a living in photography, people should try podcasting because it's just as hard. But Jeff, it's been awesome talking to you and just hearing your story, your background, and honestly, your passion for Kentucky, which is what this show is all about, is about people who are so passionate about the state. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing that with us. And now I just want to give the floor to you. Where can my listeners find you at? Where can they find your work and where can they follow you at?
Okay. Well, a couple of my books are at Kentucky Branded, speaking of all things Kentucky, and My Favorite Things. And then even at Clean Sweep Car Wash, believe it or not, they've got an awesome gift shop. And so people sell a lot of my books. And then as far as my work is concerned, it's real simple. It's my name, jeffrogers.com. Oh, it's like there's not a D in there. And then I recently wanted people to be able to be an augmented reality way to see my work on all of theirs above or wherever they want to put it. And so I started a new website called jeffrogersfineart.com. And so it's live, but it's not 100% yet. I'm still getting there, but it's wild. You can actually take a picture of your living room or wherever, and you can find one of my pictures on my website and literally put my picture on your wall in whatever setting you've got, and you're able to increase the size and get an idea of what size it needs to be in order to have the impact that you wanted. So it's again, man, it's technology. It's awesome.
That's how me and my wife bought a coffee table off Amazon. So I totally get that.
Very cool. And then my email is jeff@jeffrogers.com. And Instagram, I'm Rogers Photo. And then on Facebook, it's Jeff Rogers Photography. I'm pretty sure that is. So that would be some touch points if anybody wanted to reach out and ask me a question or wanted help with anything.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your expertise and some of your passion here. And hopefully we can have you back on the show again sometime soon.
That'd be awesome. Thanks so much for me.